Charles Miller, who will give us an overview of some of the commercial space activities at NASA. Thank
you. Good morning. Welcome to the revolution. First of all, I'd like to start off this morning to make some linkages from where we are today to where the Space Frontier Foundation and many of you in this audience were many years ago, and kind of create a whole cloth for where we are and what we might do today and why we're here. And we're really here. We're from the government, and we're here to ask for your help. I'm serious about that. And there's a reason for that. Let me try to paint this in the context where we are today. As Doug was saying, change is difficult, and we're on the verge of a transformation, of a paradigm shift, you might call it. And some people make this shift earlier than others. It's a really natural process that happens all the time as a paradigm shift. If you go back to the American Revolution, when the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776, what most people forget, there was surveys at the time, and about 1/3 of the people, the colonies, wanted the revolution. 1/3 of them were totally against it, and 1/3 were sitting on the fence and didn't know what to think. We do not make these shifts naturally all at the same time altogether. For me personally, I made the break with what we were doing wasn't working in the early 90s after the first big, we were all, most of us were at the time still in this mental model that the president calls out to go out to space and declares the big vision and a repeat of Apollo. It's going to happen, and the first Bush president did it. He declared that we were going back to the moon and Mars, and we had this $500 billion program proposed, and it collapsed. And at that time, I said, this doesn't work. And that's when I started thinking about what do we need to do different. It took me a couple years. I just knew what I was out there advocating this type of thing, and what I was proposing just didn't work. I took a couple years off from anything related to space and had to think anew. A lot of other people take a lot more time. And in the middle of the 90s is really where the Space Frontier Foundation, as the thought leaders of the space policy, the space movement, and how we can think anew, proposed this distinction of a near frontier, far frontier, that the government should be off out in the Lewis and Clark missions on the far frontier and hand off low Earth orbit to private industry. It was a new distinction, a new thought about how we could, in partnership, achieve these grand visions of expanding human civilization across the solar system. And Rick Tumlinson, it's on the record, testified 3 times in the mid-90s to Congress, laying out these new distinctions. I assert that what the president's proposal at its core is the foundation's proposal from the mid-90s. It was partway there in the president's vision for space exploration. It didn't get all the way, and then President Obama's proposal takes it fully, well, not totally fully to what some of you have, but it completes the key change that's needed. The proposal does at its core. And the Deputy Administrator will talk a little bit more tonight about this in her remarks. So why are we here today? We have a President's proposal for commercial crew. We have COTS and commercial resupply services that came from the previous administration as part of that break, handing off the low Earth orbit, handing off the near frontier to private industry. We have a cruiser. We're here today to look at the other things. We're here today to ask for your help in thinking about what should we, private industry, and the U.S. government do in partnership next. There's a lot of things we could. The President has laid out to NASA that we should foster new commercial space capabilities. If we try to do them all, we're going to fail. So we started a process at NASA this spring starting with a blank page, and said, what are all the different types of commercial space capabilities on the near frontier that we might foster? And which ones should we foster? And we started looking at things from benefits to NASA's mission, benefits to national security, benefits to economic growth, benefits to social, cultural, environmental, STEM education, inspiration. We also took into other account things like synergies and linkages, which ones, if they come first, will make the others a lot easier or leverage. And then we started looking at the other side. What is the status of the companies in the industry that are working in these areas? Is there serious companies already developed or organized? Have they raised capital? What are the technology barriers? How far do they need to get to actually having a real capability? What's the status of the capital markets? How much money are they raising? And we pulled together a NASA workshop in early June with representatives of all the NASA centers, all the NASA mission directors, brought in a couple experts outside to help facilitate the conversation. And we started with 13 different commercial space capabilities we might foster. We reorganized it down to 8. And at the end of the 2-day workshop in early June, we had made an unequivocal determination out of the 8 remaining, the #1 priority of a new commercial space capability for our nation to foster was low-cost, reliable access to space. It was almost unanimous. By the end of this 2-day workshop, we had over 50 people working on it. Of the 35 remaining, 32 out of 35 said low-cost, reliable access to space is the most important area that we should focus on. And then a clear, unequivocal #2 after that was removed was in-space servicing. Now, within the in-space servicing category, as the clear #2, we had 5 sub-segments of capabilities that we determined were important. One was propellant transfer depots storage. Another was satellite refueling, repair, maintenance. A third was orbital transfer services. Fourth was orbital debris mitigation removal. And fifth was on-orbit assembly. Thank you. Coming out of this, I did not need to persuade the participants, and some of those participants from the centers are here in the room with you today, want to hear this conversation. It was clear. They said, we need to hear from industry. The next step was, what are the barriers to closing the business case to standing up these capabilities? What are the 2 or 3 or 4 top barriers that we need to address in order for these capabilities to come into existence as commercial capabilities? And everybody said, we need to hear from industry. So we've, since early June, have been surveying industry, talking privately. There's no acquisition. We've been talking to industry privately and inviting some in and by email, and gathering data. What is industry saying? And this is part of that process. We are here to hear from this room with the NewSpace entrepreneurs, the companies, the CEOs and participants, what you think the top priority barriers are in these 2 areas, low-cost, reliable access to space and in-space servicing. We are gathering all this data and information, and we are bringing it all back together to NASA headquarters next week. Okay, and we're going to discuss what we hear and come to some determination and basically say, these are what we've heard are the top 3 or 4, maybe 5 barriers in each of these areas. And then we're going to start discussing what are we going to do about it. So again, we're here to ask for your help, to help us determine what are the top barriers that we need to deal with to stand up these commercial capabilities. This is, I am very hopeful about this process. We will be presenting these findings as senior leadership. We have a White House that is primed to hear what we determine, because they've charged us to go do this. And this is a new era where there is a powerful listening to what we come up with. Now, I just want to make it clear, people will be gathering ideas. Once we come up with these barriers, we'll start discussing ideas for addressing the barriers. We are starting to capture potential ideas. So if you're talking about here's the barrier and here's an idea to deal with the barrier, we want to start gathering that too. So this is the start of a new partnership. I am hopeful that on an ongoing basis every year that the NASA can work with this community, the NewSpace community, perhaps through the NewSpace conference, have this type of revisit every year about the key issues that we need to address in a partnership. And I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity. So with no further ado, I'll hand it over to our moderator to begin the public discussion.